Thank you for joining me today. It's Brian Gubernick, and welcome to the No Days Off podcast, where we believe that every single day brings a new opportunity to get better. Today, I want to tell you about a man that you've probably never heard of. And if you have heard of him, then there's no way you knew the full story. I did not know of this guy, and I was shocked when I learned about him. This man's name is Junior Bridgman. Actually, his name is Ulysses Lee Bridgman Jr. Junior Bridgman was born in East Chicago, Indiana. He was the son of a steel mill worker, and he grew up blue collar. He learned early that nothing worth having comes easy, and he carried that lesson with him every single day of his life. Junior Bridgman made it to the NBA. As a matter of fact, Junior was drafted 8th overall in 1975 by the Los Angeles Lakers, but he was immediately traded to the Milwaukee Bucks as part of the deal that sent Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to LA. Many of you probably heard of Kareem. So he was drafted, top 10 pick, number 8 in 75 by the Lakers, but immediately traded to the Bucks for Kareem. So before he played a single professional game, he was already a transaction. In other words, he was a cog. He was a piece in someone else's puzzle. Now, Junior spent 12 years in the league, 10 of those years with Milwaukee. And here's the thing about Junior Bridgman. He was never the star. He was what they call in basketball, the NBA, the sixth man, meaning he was the guy who came off the bench. They didn't have a sixth man award just yet back then. He may have won it a time or two if they did, but they didn't invent that award until later after he played. He was the guy that averaged about 13 points every game, which is pretty solid, which is pretty reliable, which is a really solid pro. But he never had the name on the headline or on the marquee. He was never the face of the franchise, though the Bucks did appreciate him, and I think they retired his number. Junior never made more than $350,000 in a single season. His entire NBA career, 12 years of playing in the NBA, which is the highest possible level, his salary peaked at $350,000. Now, by today's standards, that's relatively nothing. 350 is a lot, don't get me wrong, but in the NBA, it's a rounding error. Now, I want you to hold that number, that 350K, because here's where the story turns, and here's why I'm talking about him today at No Days Off. Junior Bridgman just recently passed away about a year ago, March 11th, 2025. He was 71 years old. He collapsed at a fundraising luncheon in Louisville, Kentucky, which was a city he loved and he had served for decades. And when the obituaries ran for Junior, the number that stopped people, like caused them pause, wasn't the 13 points a game that he scored. It was $1.4 billion. That's his net worth. That was his net worth at the time of his death. $1.4 billion. He was a billionaire. $1.4 billion. Built by a man who never earned more than $350K in a single year as an NBA player. Built by the sixth man, not even a starter. So when I read this, because he's ranked as one of the 4 or 5, I think, billionaire athletes, I had to ask, how did that happen? How does a backup basketball player, a guy who never had a shoe deal like a Jordan, never had a global brand, like a LeBron, never had the kind of platform that today's athletes frankly take for granted. How does he end up as one of the wealthiest former athletes on the entire planet? Alongside Michael Jordan and alongside Magic Johnson and LeBron James. Well, here's how. While Junior's teammates were on vacation during the offseason, Junior was working. He wasn't training, he was working. He walked into Wendy's restaurants, the fast food restaurant. He walked into Wendy's restaurants and he asked the restaurant to put him to work. He learned how to bag fries. He ran the drive-through. He studied, so the story goes, the operating model from inside out. And he wasn't doing it as like a celebrity looking for a photo op. He was a student of the game. And as someone who understood that his basketball career would have a finish line at some point, he intended to be prepared for when that day came. A Milwaukee Bucks executive once advised him to pay attention to the business world while he still could, while the doors were open. And so while people would return his calls as a result of that, while the platform existed for him to go and do that before his career was over, Junior Bridgman took that advice and he took it pretty seriously. In 1984, he invested in his first Wendy's franchise. Then he bought another, and he built Bridgman Foods into an empire that at its peak operated, I think, just over 450 restaurants. Wendy's, Chili's, something else, Fazoli's, across 20 or so states. He had $500 million in annual revenue. From a man who spent his summers learning to work a drive-through window. There's a story that captures everything I think you need to know about Junior Bridgman. A woman had walked into one of his Wendy's locations one day and she recognized him. She knew him as a basketball player. The next day, that woman called into a local radio talk show and she said something to the effect of, "I think it's a real shame. I was at the Wendy's at 123 Main Street and I saw Junior Bridgman working behind the counter." And she was saying it as though that's the best that these ex-athletes like Junior can do. Now, Junior Bridgman heard that story and he laughed about it because the woman had no idea. He didn't just work at that Wendy's, he owned it. And he owned a dozen more just like it. See, Junior wasn't embarrassed to be seen doing the work. That was the whole point. For him, I think that was always the whole point. Because he didn't stop at restaurants. And in 2016, he actually sold a significant chunk of his holdings for $250 million. And he pivoted and he started a Coca-Cola bottling company. He acquired distribution territory across a handful of states and then into Canada. Then in 2020, when the magazines Ebony and Jet, when both of those two iconic pillars of the Black American culture and of the media, when they were in financial trouble, Junior Bridgman stepped in. He bought those two magazines and he preserved them. And because he understood that wealth without purpose is just a number. He had purpose behind his money. And then in September of 2024, which was really the final chapter, Junior Bridgman purchased a 10% ownership stake in the Milwaukee Bucks. The team that he had put 10 years in to as a player, the team that once traded him, as a transaction. Well, he came back not as a player, but he came back as an owner. And Forbes confirmed his net worth had crossed $1.4 billion just weeks before he passed away. Here's what I keep thinking about Junior Bridgman. He was never, ever, ever the loudest guy in the room. He was certainly not the most famous. He never had the brightest spotlight or the biggest contract. He was the sixth man. He was the guy who prepared while others were celebrating, while they were being celebrated. He was the guy who studied the business while others were probably looking at the stat sheet. He was the guy that was willing to stand behind a counter and learn and really learn what it took to build something that would last. So for entrepreneurs, I think that's us. Like, we don't all get to be the star. Most of us are the sixth man. Most of us are aiming to build something steady day after day, without the fanfare, without the audience, without anyone calling the radio station to say that they're impressed. As entrepreneurs, we are bagging our own fries. We are doing a lot of the unglamorous work. We show up when the doors close and when nobody's watching. Junior Bridgman is really good proof that the sixth man, first guy off the bench, can win. Not just compete, but win. Win bigger than the stars. And he ended up with more to show for it than almost anyone else. So remember the number 350,000 a year as the starting point and 1.4 billion at the end. The gap between those two numbers, for Junior at least, was called work. It was called the work. Great story. That's all I have for you today. The No Days Off podcast. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, every single day brings a new opportunity to get better. So let's get after it.